If you're new here, you should know that every Sunday morning, what we attempt to do here is to create something that is encouraging and engaging for you. Not just for you, but for your life as you approach life. Our mission here, and Kate said this earlier this morning, is to see people come to discover God in such a real way that they're able to develop faith, this trusting, lasting, confident relationship, and then display Christ-like love in our attitudes and actions. Now, this summer, we're working through a series called Slip and Slide. And if you've been here before, you kind of know this has nothing to do with getting wet and pulling a hamstring, okay? It's not that. It really is something a lot more dangerous than that. And that is when we slip and slide in our thinking about God. And so what we're doing in this series is making sure that we are thinking rightly about God. That's theology. Theology is just simply thinking about God. That's what that word means. We all think about God. We've talked about that. But as I began to put this series together in the spring, there was not a message on it or in the outline that I'm going to share today. I sat on my front porch last Sunday afternoon and I realized that we needed to take a different direction this Sunday. And here's why. Last Sunday was a really good Sunday. It was a wonderful Sunday, celebrating Jesus and thanking Him for our country. But there was a little bit of a shadow over last Sunday, at least for me, and I think for us nationally there was, in the sense that what happened in Texas, it just cast a shadow. Any of us who have parents and we think about what happened at that camp, we see our daughter or we see our son's face on those children's faces. We can't get away from that. And for some of us, we are very keenly aware of what's happening in the Middle East. We know what's happening in Ukraine. And we know that there was a mass shooting in Chicago last week. And there's this thing that falls over. And even through the course of last Sunday, there were points in that Sunday where people confided in me and said, hey, listen, my loved one has a diagnosis of cancer and it doesn't look real good. So Sunday afternoon, I'm sitting on my front porch talking to a friend about a tragic loss that has happened in their family. And pray with that friend and then hang the phone up. And I'm sitting on the front porch, picturesque afternoon, beautiful day, beautiful neighborhood. And my soul's heavy. And for those of us who follow Jesus, we know He's a realist. We know that He says things like this. He says, in this world, you're going to have trouble. And I'm like, yep, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the trouble really clear right now. In my spirit, I'm feeling it, and I'm seeing the trouble. What I really need right now, and what I think these people need, and what my friend that I just got off the phone with, what they need is they need a little bit of the take heart, overcome the world. And so this morning I want to talk about just a slip that will happen, and then we slide away from something entirely different from Jesus when we take this slip. It's a slip that happens when all of us, we go through these times in our life. Let me tell you something. If you've not been through a hard time, it's coming for you. And if you've been through a hard time and you're on the other side of it, you're grateful. But the reality is, you're either in a hard time, been through a hard time, or you're going to go through a hard time. There's going to be a moment where trouble comes. And when trouble comes, whether it's a personal thing or it's a public thing, someone is going to look at you and say to you, well, everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. And that word, that's a word of consolation. But at the end of the day, I think it's a slip. I think it's a slip, just like every slip that we've looked at. There's some truth in it, but there's treachery in it as well. It looks solid and stable, but when you step on it, it's a slip, and it slides us away from something entirely different from Jesus. And we say it in a conciliatory sort of way. Everything happens for a reason. And sure, there are things that happen that happen for a reason. And I want us to look at those. Let's just back up for just a moment and acknowledge there's some truth in this. And let's actually look at a few Bible verses. We're not going to drill down deep at this point in the message because there's 3 or 4 scriptures I want to get to at the end of the message and really drill down deep on, camp out there. But we're going to sprint through this. There's about 6 reasons that you could say, hey, it's true. Everything happens for a reason. Here's the first one. We talked about it last week. There's misuse of freedom. We talked about this. We all have this mark of God in us, this heart of God for us, that He allows us to make choices. We are free to choose. And sometimes we choose things that end up creating tragedy and creating things that are painful and trouble for ourselves and for others. Because we all know, hey, we're free to choose, but we are not free from the consequences of our choices. And neither are those people that are close to us. Paul writes this epic book called Romans. And at the very beginning of it, he talks about this thing that we do, that we choose. And he says there were people, they knew God, but they didn't honor Him as God. They didn't give thanks to Him. And so they became futile in what? Watch what happens in this passage. We're sprinting through this one, but watch what happens. They're thinking. They begin to think wrongly. They begin to think wrongly about Him. They begin to slip. And they became foolish in their hearts. So it comes from the mind and it sinks down in their hearts. Now they're conscious. They've got futile thinking, but their conscience is foolish. And they claim to be wise because they became fools, even though they became wise, claimed to be wise. And they exchanged the glory of an immortal God for images resembling mortal man, birds and animals and creeping things. And you're thinking, oh, Blake, this is about primitive man. That's what primitive man did. He exchanged the immortal God for little statues that looks like a real God or a real person. We don't do that anymore. We're much more sophisticated than that. No, we do that. Every time you pick up a piece of plastic and glass and you choose to spend the first 15 minutes of your day looking at that instead of the pages of God's Word, I promise you, you are exchanging the immortal God for something that looks like man because it ain't real. And we exchange these things. It says images that resembled birds and creeping things. Where did this begin? Futile thinking. Foolish hearts. Therefore, just God gave them up to the lust of their hearts, to the impurity. They had a choice. God didn't want this for them. It wasn't God's design for them. It's what they wanted, so God gave them up to the dishonoring of their bodies. Look what happened. It goes from what they thought to what they believed, and then now they're actually dishonoring their bodies. And because they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served creature rather than the Creator who is blessed forever, because this happened, God gave them, here's the reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. Well, that's the first thing. We have choices. We can misuse our freedom. The other thing is that we're living in a broken world. This world has been broken. This world is not, you're not intended, you're not built to live in this temporal world. This world was broken. It happened when God created, it happened at the dawn of creation. God put Adam and He put Eve, the first one of us, the first human beings, in a perfect environment. And in order for that environment to be perfect, in order for that environment to have even the chance, the modicum of love in it, there had to be ability to choose. And so God gave these people a choice. And He told Adam, hey, listen, you got it. It's all yours. Eve, it's all yours. Hey, listen, there's one tree. Don't eat the fruit of it. You can look at the tree. You can smell the blossoms of the tree. You can sit under the shade of the tree. Just don't eat of it. And he ate of it. And when he ate of it, it broke the world. God looked at Adam and He said, because you've listened to the voice of your wife, because you've listened to her. And sometimes guys would like to look at this, chauvinistic kind of guys like to look at this and say, you see, honey, I'm not supposed to listen to you. Has nothing to do with that. Here's the thing. It's because he listened to someone other than God. That's what happened. and you've eaten the tree of which I commanded you, you should not eat, and cursed is the ground. Two things happened that was never meant to happen. These two things were not part of the original plan. Curse, pain. That's not a part of the original plan. That's because he misused his choice and he broke the world for all of us. Curse just means things are no longer the way they should be. Pain, I think we know that one. Therefore, this Roman letter again from Paul. Paul's writing and he says, listen, just as sin came into the world through one man, that's Adam, death through sin, and so spread to all because men have sinned. We've been broken. This world is broken. Third reason why something could happen that's bad is just simply the laws of physics and biology. If I jump off this stage, I might be all right. Give me 20 years and I jump off this stage, I'm probably not going to be all right. We break down. You know, the psalmist says that our years are 70 or maybe 80. I don't know if you've done any research lately, but the lifespan of an average human being is about 70, 80 years old. 70 in developing countries, 80 in developed countries. And sure, some people out, you know, I think the oldest person lived to be about 122. I just wanted to see if you were listening. Man, I tell you, and the span is just toil and trouble, and soon they're gone away. I mean, we don't last. And we do things that we're not built to do. I mean, like we get into cars and travel anywhere from 50 to 70 miles an hour. Our bodies aren't meant for that. And if the sudden stop happens, it's just bad news. Because we're limited. I mean, we're constrained to the laws of physics and biology. We also are limited to our power and control. We only have so much power and we only have so much control. And even that's diminishing. There's a verse, I want you to look it up. It said, out of Isaiah 40, it just says that all flesh is grass and it's going to pass away, just even though it's beautiful. Even though we're beautiful people, even though the flower is beautiful, it passes away. It's here one moment, gone the next. If you, just so you'll know, if you're about 28 to 32, you're at your physical peak right now. All right? 28, 32, if that's you, way to go. Enjoy it. Eyes are bright, skin is tight, muscles are, doing what they're supposed to do. I'm telling you, you're at the peak of your game right now. Enjoy it. Because see, we're limited in our power, and we can't influence as much as we think we can. We do have power. We do have control of certain things. We talked about that. There's choice. And those choices ripple from us to others. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do when things bad happen? We're limited. We're limited in our power of control. And one of the ways this shows up is that some people who have power, they abuse power. It can be a parent. It can be a teacher. It can be a politician. In Israel, it was a politician. Isaiah writes, God tells Isaiah this. He says, their princesses are rebels and they're companions of thieves. That they do not have the character of a leader. And everyone loves a bribe and runs after gifts. Talking about the people in power. They're not, and then this is so important for those of us who are in leadership. You know what leadership does? Real pure leadership? That means that you're the most powerful person in the room and you're looking after the least powerful person in the room. That's what leadership looks like. But this is not leadership. They're abusing power. They don't bring justice to the fatherless, and the widow's cause does not come to them. They don't even see those people. Abuse of power, we've all seen it. And then there's a reason for suffering that is just a neglect of wisdom. Wisdom is basically not being super intelligent. You can be super intelligent and be wise. Wisdom is taking the knowledge that you have and knowing how to leverage it in life for the good of others and for the good of yourself, so that you can have the most amount of joy and the least amount of regret. That's what wisdom looks like. Someone can be incredibly intelligent and be an incredible fool. Someone can be just about ignorant and be incredibly wise. We neglect the wisdom. At the end, and I listed about more verses than these two. I hope that you'll, like I said, we're sprinting through these. I hope that you'll take time to look at these. But just look at this. The simple are killed by their turning away from wisdom. Wisdom is personified at this point as a woman in this passage, and the complacency of fools destroy them. They don't do anything. They don't take action. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure. Talking about listens to wisdom and will be at ease without dread of disaster. You know, one of the things that wisdom does for us is that it allows us to live a life where we don't have to keep looking over our shoulder. But when we neglect wisdom, trouble will come. But as I look at all six of these things, I've got to be honest that even though these may be the reasons that things happen, they're all true. When I think about Texas, it's not very emotionally satisfying. When I think about my mom dying when she's 42 and I'm 12, it is not satisfying. It's not satisfying to look at a woman like her who had to scrape and claw for every bit of education she got, raised in borderline poverty, finally gets her Methodist degree, and is beginning to live the life that she always dreamed of. She's learning to paint because her parents couldn't afford that. She's learning to play the piano. Her parents couldn't afford that. She's learning to play tennis. Her parents couldn't have afforded that. And she is one of the most beautiful, she's the quintessence of womanhood when I think of who she was. Why at 42 does that go away? It's not emotionally satisfying, and it creates this pain inside of me. And if I look for long, I end up with a blank screen, and I'm like, what's the reason? And it can lead us when we're just simply going out there looking for reasons. If everything has a reason, that means we ought to be able to know what the reason is, right? And if you drill down far enough looking for reason, what you may end up with is the absolute opposite conclusion that everything is random. And that's more shaky. And that leads to both of these things, whether everything just kind of happens, some cosmic tumbler out there is making everything work together for a reason, or everything's random. You know what it creates you to be? It creates you to be a victim. And I don't think that's what God has for us. I don't think that's what He has planned for us. Sure, we're broken people living in a broken world, and He has a solution. Always has had a solution in mind. So the danger in saying, hey, listen, everything happens for a reason, it's a slip. And we will slide away from something completely different from Christianity, completely different from what God built us for. Because what we slide away from is what God allows, God redeems. If God is allowing something in our life, He is going to redeem it. Now let's just do some pretty high theology for a moment. This is in your follow guide. One of my mentors, Jim Dennison, writes about this in one of his books. It's referenced in the follow guide. But let's just go into seminary class for just about 3 minutes here. Let's talk about the things about God that, since God is all that. We believe that as Jesus followers. We believe that God is all that. But let's get real specific about Him being all that. These are the things that He's all that. He's all-knowing. Since God is all-knowing, He knows everything you face. Nothing's hidden from Him. You can't hide from Him, and He knows what's going to happen. And He knows what's happening. And since God is all-powerful, this means He's sovereign. This means He's in control of the world, and He must allow or cause all that happens to you and in this world. He's all-powerful. So that must be true of Him. But He's also all-loving. His character is perfect, and He can only want what is best for you in this world. If God allows anything He does not redeem for a greater good, He makes a mistake. And there are some people that actually teach this. They would say, well, sometimes God messes up. Boy, you got a tiny God. But God's flawless. He has no ability by which to make a mistake. there's two times, once in the Old Testament, once in the New Testament, that we get to see what worship will look like in heaven. Worship is just simply declaring the greatness and goodness of God. And we get a picture of what it looks like both in Isaiah and we get a picture of what it looks like in Revelation. And both times what we see is we see angelic, heavenly beings and saints that have gone on before us crowded around the throne room of God saying one word over and over and over again. Holy, holy, holy. Holy means just simply different, set apart, perfect. And that's God, without flaw. Therefore, God will redeem all He allows. Now, this is where I want us to dig deep into some Scripture this morning. You need to understand He is going to redeem all that He allows. But understand something. We're not going to fully understand it always in the moment. We're going to catch glimpses of it. And one day we will know it fully. This is what Paul writes. He says, now we see in the mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall be fully known, even as I have been fully known. Like nothing to hide, no way to hide, nothing to hide from. Man, if you've ever had this point in your life where someone has said something that's not true about you, your story is going to be set right then, if not before. And you're going to understand the story. You're going to see the story of how God was using that and everything else in your life. And you'll understand it fully. But it's going to take a moment. It's going to take time. He says it's kind of like looking in this mirror and it's got splotches and it's kind of opaque and you can't really make out what's in the mirror or what's on the other side of the window. But you can see a bit of redemption there. The other thing is, we can engage both redemption and destiny now. We can do this now. Paul writes, we know that for those who love God, those of us who have a relationship with God, that all things work together for good. For those who are called according to His purpose. What's His purpose? His purpose is real simple. Make disciples of Jesus, share the good news of Jesus. You love Him, that becomes your heart cry. That becomes what is motivating you and pushing you forward. Share the good news of Jesus, make disciples for Jesus. Man, you're called according to that purpose. All heck may break loose around you. But God's going to use it for your good, as long as that is our purpose. And then watch this. There's a destiny He has for every individual in this room. Those He foreknew, He also predestined. It's your destiny to be conformed to the image of His Son in order that He, Jesus, might be the firstborn among many brothers. Don't let this word foreknow trip you up. Just because God knows something before it happens doesn't mean that He makes it happen. This is really important. Silly illustration, but if Beverly and I are on vacation and we go to breakfast, I know she's going to order the French toast. And she knows if there's pancake batter in the kitchen with blueberries running around, I'm going to have blueberry pancakes. She knows this. She's not sitting across the table going, ooh, eat blueberry pancakes. She's not controlling me. It's my decision. And I know that illustration breaks down. God knows what you're going to do, but it is absolutely your decision. And don't let this other word trip you up, this whole idea of predestination or being predestined. God has a destiny for you. My friend Ed Barber, he had a destiny for me. It was called Mount Kilimanjaro. It's this big mountain in Africa, okay? And he said, Blake, we're going to go hike this on my 50th anniversary, my 50th birthday. I said, okay, Ed, we do this. Ed and I'd run a couple of marathons together. We'd done other things together. So why not hike Kilimanjaro together? And so I say, I'll go. And then, and he's created this destiny for me. He's predestined. The plane tickets, he'll buy them. The Sherpa, the tent, it's all going to be paid for, right? It's my destiny. And I decide I have a little bit too much work to do. And I just can't get out of the country that long. And so now, whenever Kilimanjaro comes on in a documentary or a drama show or whatever we're watching, Beverly and I are watching on TV, Kilimanjaro, they'll pan across it and Bev will go, could have been you. Could have been you. Because it was my destiny, right? God has a destiny for you. And listen, it is that you might be the firstborn among many brothers of Jesus. We don't talk about this much. But do you understand your destiny, if you're a man, is to be a brother of Jesus? Do you understand if you are a woman, that your destiny is to be conformed so much into the image of Christ that you look like the sister of Jesus? I'm not making that up. It's right there. So how do we begin to realize His redemption in the last 10 minutes that we have together this morning? We accept His comfort. Listen to this. I tell you what, look, Jesus, Matthew 5:4, He looks at a crowd who has never heard anyone speak the way He is speaking. And at the very beginning of His message, He says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Now, there's been a lot of different translations of that, but you know what I believe that means? I believe it means, blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. Let's paraphrase it. Blessed are those who are honest about the way they feel so that they can be comforted. Blessed are those who don't stuff down their feelings. Blessed are those who don't deny what happened to them. Blessed are those who mourn, who grieve, because God will comfort them. Jesus said that His Spirit, He described His Spirit in Greek as parakletos, counselor, comforter. That's who He is. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who is the Father of mercies and the God of some comfort. No, He's the God of all comfort, and He comforts us in all our affliction. I would just ask you to accept His comfort, to step into His comfort, and know that that is who your God is, that is who your Savior is, that is who the Spirit of God is. Be honest about what you're feeling. Grieve, but accept His comfort, and see what will happen is that you'll be able to extend His comfort. Because the passage goes on, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort which we ourselves have received from God. And I look at this passage, and I remember this when I was like in high school, and I used to think, well, God, if you really want to comfort us, just remove the pain. And then you won't have to comfort us, and there won't be anybody for me to comfort. It'll just be good. The world's broken. God is not unrealistic. Jesus is a realist. He looks at us and says, hey, listen, in this world, you're going to have trouble. Having God in your life does not remove the pain. Having God in your life means that you have someone in your life that is bigger than the pain, and that can handle the pain, and they can comfort you in the pain, even when it's excruciating. Strengthen the suffering. 3 ways to strengthen the suffering is just this. Give. Found out last Monday morning that I mentioned Jim a few moments ago, that one of his good friends was lost in the flood in Texas. He was the camp director of Camp Mystic. And it was painful, right? And Jim immediately in his blog the next morning posted, Texans on mission. We can give. We can step in to the suffering, and we can give. We can go. When the war broke out in Ukraine, something rattled in my heart. I was in Pensacola, Florida. It was the spring of 2022, and it messed with me. So much so that I took a walk, I looked at the TV, I sat in my living room, I said, God, I don't know what this is, but I got to go. And I know there's no way some little executive pastor in Pensacola, Florida is going to go to Ukraine. But I'm just asking you, if I could go, I will go. August of that same year, I stepped across the Romanian border into Ukraine, and I spent about a week there with artillery shells going off and in curfew in my Mykolaiv, being able to just strengthen the suffering just for a moment. Sometimes it's just give, go, and other times it is just be. Just be. This is Job. Job lost everything. He lost He lost his finances. He lost his family. His wife was cross with him. He was losing his marriage. And his friends come, and this is the best part of the book, I think, as friendship goes, as friends he had. They just come and they sat with him in the dirt for 7 days. They're just sitting down, not saying anything, just sitting in the mud of the tears that he's cried and being with him. Step into the suffering and strengthen the suffering. Fourth thing, is to look for redemption. I want to close by telling a story. So just bear with me for a moment. I have a good friend named Russell. You've heard me talk about Russell. Most of the time when I talk about Russell, it's funny. This is not one of the funny ones. Russell was in our student ministry in Birmingham when he was a 7th grader. He was again in our student ministry in Atlanta when he was a 11th grader and a 12th grader. Went off to Ole Miss. I don't know if you know much about Ole Miss. They don't win all their football games, but they've never lost a party. And Russell was a star player in that partying. In his fraternity, he was where he was a legacy. And he did that for a while. And he was miserable. And he sat down with me one day over a break, and he said, Blake, I'm so tired of running from God. And I said, yeah, it's about time. And he began to follow Jesus on the campus there at Oxford, Mississippi, and began to see people come to know the Lord. He partnered up with several other guys in his fraternity and on campus, and partnered with a ministry called Cru. And in the midst of this, there was a kid named Tommy that became his friend. And Tommy just had this heart for the Lord. He was just infectious. And people were coming to know the Lord, and they were moving forward. But Tommy and Russell and 2 other guys, they decided they needed to go to a conference where they could better learn how to share the good news and better learn how to make disciples. And on that trip to that conference, a car cut in front of them, a semi-truck rather, and it sent the Tahoe that they were in tumbling. And Tommy was thrown from the car because Tommy couldn't sleep with a seatbelt on, and he had to loosen his seatbelt. The other 3 guys walked away. Tommy would never wake from the nap he was taking. It crushed Russell. There was trauma involved that I won't go into, but it marked Russell for life. And someone decided, hey, listen, we're going to buy a book, and we're going to circulate this book all over the campus of Ole Miss in honor of Tommy. It was an old book. It was a book called More Than a Carpenter. It was written by an apologist named Josh McDowell, who was well into his 70s at that point. And they just canvassed the campus with this book called More Than a Carpenter that tells people that they can trust and know and walk with Jesus. And Josh McDowell, this guy who back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s, he could just pick up a microphone and 2,000 college students would show up. But he's old now. But he hears what's happening in Ole Miss. He says, I want to go speak at Ole Miss. And so Russell and his friends rent out the basketball arena there at Ole Miss. And all these students show up. And they have this old video of Tommy sharing his testimony. The arena's full, and Tommy, like from the grave, shares his testimony of Jesus. And then Josh McDowell stands up and speaks. And over 400 Ole Miss college students come to know the Lord. But time marches on. Russell takes a job in Gainesville, Florida, marries, has a kid, moves to Birmingham. He and his wife begin to foster, and they adopt their 3rd child as they're fostering. And then they find out this 3rd child that they adopted, Rosiah, has a little brother, half-brother, born into an impossible, just suffering, pain, nothing right with it, family. And so they foster him as well, and they end up adopting him. And Russell gives him the name Tommy. in honor of his friend. What I haven't told you is that the trauma of that wreck still lives in Russell's heart. He stays in touch with Big Tommy's parents, like he'll call them on the anniversary of his passing. And Tommy's parents were aware that there was a little boy adopted who Russell named Tommy. But every time Russell thinks about Big Tommy's parents, there's kind of like this little mini panic attack that happens in him. And so last spring, they're at an Ole Miss baseball game. The only thing that's right with the picture that I'm about to describe is Oxford in the springtime. And so Russell is sitting there along third base line, and he looks across first base line, and he sees Tommy's parents, Big Tommy's parents. He has little Tommy with him. And Molly Ann, his wife, can tell, oh, you're about to have one of those. Can tell that he's upset. And she looks at Russell and she says, "You got to go introduce him to them. You got to do it." She does it without being emotional because she's strong that way. And so he walks across the stadium, and they know it's little Tommy. And they meet and they talk. And there's so much wrong with that picture. There's so much wrong with it. Parents missing an adult child. A little boy born into a family that was impossible. None of that's right. A grown man in his 40s still having panic attacks of something that happened when he was college. So much not right with it. But my gosh, there's redemption in that. Do you see the redemption in that? Do you see that there's 400 college students that know Jesus? Do you see that there's a little boy who not only has a safe place and a home to live, but he has a legacy to carry forward with the name Tommy? Listen, I don't know what it is that's running off the tracks in your life right now. I don't know where it is that you need redemption. I don't know if it's someone's broken your heart, that it's your parents, or it's a child, but God wants to comfort you. And I would just ask you to step into that comfort, and when the time is right, extend that comfort. And if there's people struggling around you, strengthen the struggling. And then look for a redeemer. Because if we'll do this, I'm promising you. No. He's promising you in His Word. If you'll do this, you'll begin to look in the mirror. And it might be a little dark at first. It might not be real clear at first. But the image that you will begin to see in the mirror is a brother or a sister of Jesus in an imperfect, broken world at an imperfect and broken time. Jesus wanted to share a meal with His closest friends. And so many times I look at this meal and I think it's got to be perfect. It must have been really good that night in Jerusalem because it must have had the best vintage of wine. The menu had to be great. The bread must have been just perfect. It wasn't. There's no reason to believe that. There was so much tension in the room. There was deception in the room. And still Jesus said, come. Come to the table. Come. And so wherever you find yourself today, like the bad time's behind you, and it's good, or it's a tough time right now, Jesus looks at you and He says, this is your table. Oh, by the way, this is not a Baptist table. This is a Jesus follower's table. And He says, come in the midst of everything not being right. So this morning, that's what we're going to do. If those of you who are serving communion, if you'll come forward for a moment. The Lord will take this meal that Jesus said to us that it's for us. remembering His sacrifice, remembering His sacrifice of redemption that works redemption in our life, is you're going to take one cup. It's double stacked. There's bread on the bottom. The grape juice is on the top. If you need gluten-free, it'll be in the middle of the tray. So just go for the middle. Shoot for the bullseye. Father, this is your table. You work redemption. And Lord, you ask us to take this meal in remembrance of you. And so we do this morning. We do this in remembrance of you. In Jesus' name.